Got two questions looking back at Saturday's game. First off, as you analyze...
Only two?
We'll start with two. When you analyze the 3rd and 17 play that Mississippi State converted, I believe it was in the first quarter, what was just the breakdown there? What did y'all need to do a little bit better to keep them short on that one?
Well, I think we have to, we have to give opponents a good deal of credit, for being able to make plays when they have to make plays if they're a good football team, which they were. I think, our pass rush sometimes creates some problems for us, which did. I mean, and pass rush is about a lot of different things, and it's not just rushing the passer, but it's being able to play off and play draw plays with their quarterback, which we got in some trouble with during that period of time. But you can only give a guy so much time back there to throw the ball, and when you do, then you're going to have some problems. And it wasn't just yes, 3rd and 17 or whatever it was. I don't know if it was exactly 17, but nevertheless, you don't want to be able to give up those plays, but it was a plethora of 3rd down plays, that hurt us. That drives that had we stopped would have prevented scores. There's probably 17 points, 14 points. For sure, probably 21, that had we been successful on 3rd down when we had the opportunity to. Sometimes, again, you have to give them credit. They did a nice job on 3rd down. They put us in jeopardy because of the draw play and trying to play the draw play, still get pass rush, and not have to, keep our guys in coverage as long as we did on a few occasions. So, that's not a real good answer other than, it's a plethora of things that, they create problems for us.
And I also wanted to ask about, what was the 3rd quarter, you guys moved into Mississippi State territory and decided to punt on 4th, and I don't remember exactly what the yardage was, but was there any thought at that point for going for the conversion at that point, or was it just... Yeah,
there's always the thought, whether you do or whether you don't, and it kind of depends on, how far, what kind of success we've had on short yardage, and whether basically it's an innate feeling of yes we can, and maybe we're taking a big risk, and considering the score, would you change it? As in hindsight, probably so, but that was we were in a position, I think, where we felt like we were just kind of behind the 8 ball, I guess, as much as anything, and they put up 500 yards of offense, and field position was a factor as well, just to help our defense out as much as possible.
Coach, I know the sample size is small right now, but how would you assess the running game through 2 games, and what have been the challenges maybe so far in running the ball and getting the ball into the end zone?
Well, it's a plethora of things, and we haven't been. This was a very good test for us, and I thought we improved in this category, but we haven't been physical enough. We've been a little soft in terms of our pass protection, which has maybe softened us up a little bit in terms of the run. But once again, Mississippi State is really has an extremely talented physical defensive front, and like I said, I told you before, I don't know all the teams in the country, but people who kind of make it their business to study that say that Mississippi State is as good as any front in the country, and I have no way of knowing that other than, as we played them, we truly did find out they're very physical, very strong, very quick up front, and it was difficult to run the ball, although we did have a few plays. And but even that being said, had we had our execution been as we had hoped for and as we had indicated during the week and as we had believed, I think we would have been much more proficient in running the ball. It's just interesting. This is getting off the question, but what comes to mind is you go back and look, which we have, over and over and over again, and looking at, the issues that we have, and as we're talking about that side of the ball offensively, and as you take it play by play and go through, it's this little execution error, on this play, that keeps you from having a substantial play, not just, the 2, 3, 4, 5 yard gains, but I mean substantial plays. Same thing on the next one, same thing on this one. So there's a plethora of plays where, we're so close and yet obviously so far away, where we're getting lost yardage plays or 1, 2, 3 yard gains because of an execution error, or in a couple of 3 cases, assignment errors that like everyone says, so easily correctable. But the point is, we haven't corrected them. That's the issue. But we had our chances. Let me put it that way, in a significant way, not just a snap here or there, but it's just ongoing. The offensive coaches showed collectively the selected plays from the ball game, and it was a long list. I mean, there's 30 some odd snaps in there, and every single one was one of those could have been, should have been type plays where, you make this quote unquote little mistake that is so out of character, and it prevents the play from being a highly successful football play, both run and pass. So, that was, one of the things that I mentioned after the ball game. I thought there was a period of time where I felt like, we had made some improvement, and I really did, believe that. I think we got a lot of things corrected, but we opened up another Pandora's box on some other issues that, that we had been fine with the previous week, but not this week.
And you've kind of been in the spot before. A year ago, you lose to an SEC team, and you rallied the troops, and the season generally goes well. Maybe what was your message rallying the guys around yesterday, coming off another loss to an SEC team as you guys go forward?
Well, I think that as much as we are pained by the loss, which I believe that our players were, and as I indicated, I mean the words I heard were disappointment, embarrassment, I think, and and what I shared with them, if you were really competitive and really care, then that will grow, over the next 24 hours, 48 hours into anger, and self-anger, and not at anybody else, and that it is significant to find out if we really have the determination and the persistence to to fight through this and come out on the right end of it, understanding that we're capable of it. If we weren't capable, that's one thing, but we do have the capabilities. We can manage to stay healthy. That would certainly make us a better football team. But again, it's me saying it is one thing, actually doing it is another, and being able to pay strict attention to the details of what we do, just that old adage about do your job, and do it the right way. I mean, we've got guys, on the offensive side of the ball, stepping on somebody's foot, tripping him, and he falls off his block, and that guy makes a tackle where had we executed it appropriately, then, it's a major play for us. And that's just one. I mean, there's tons of things, guys maybe not being as physical as we need to be and getting knocked back, picking off a puller, And consequently, we get a guy that's unblocked, and had we gotten to pull around and made a block on him, that happened 2, 3, 4 times, then you've got substantial plays. So it's kind of little things like that. I say little, they become big things. I don't believe in little things, but that's the terminology. But they're so, and you hear this from all of us as coaches. We always say correctable mistakes. Things that you can correct, and visually they truly are. But you have to invest yourself in doing it and have that commitment and that persistence to make that happen. And do it on a daily basis. So it creates habits. That's because we're all product of what our habits are, and we develop bad habits. You go through the course of a week, and if you're kind of going through the motions a little bit, you're working against a scout group, which is not near as talented as the opponent will be, not near as physical, and you kind of go through the motions with them, and then on Saturday, that guy comes off the line of scrimmage, and is kind of like an Army tank, and you're not, you don't feel prepared for it, and it kind of surprises you a little bit, but nevertheless it creates a problem and disrupts plays, and takes you a while to get back on your feet and understand, hey, I better get up and compete. Not that they're not competitive, it's just, it's easy to get lulled into bad habits if you don't go through the process every single day. Yesterday I thought they did. Now we couldn't be as physical because we're in shorts and helmets with all these new rules, but as far as the tempo and the spirit, and you could just you could see the determination that was ever present in their faces and their actions. So we'll see.
Coach, both excuse me, through 2 games, both the run defense and the pass defense have kind of had their games where they did some really good things, and then another game where they may have struggled a little bit more. Given that, how crucial is it in this last non-conference game before Big 12 play gets going to really get them both on the same page and have them both clicking in the same game?
Well, I think first and foremost we have to go back, and which we are, and revisit. We were really bad against the run, and the schemes that they ran against us are not unlike schemes that we see. I mean, our own offense runs them, and our defenses run. It's worked against our own offense for the first 25 days of practice, but we didn't play as nearly as effectively. Kind of some of the same issues. Guys just not executing what their assignments are, not staying in the gaps that they're supposed to be in. Just some of it mental mistakes and some of it execution mistakes, to a far greater degree than what we had seen previously through camp and in the first ball game. Maybe tried to do a couple things that we just couldn't execute well. That's my fault. If we try to do something that the players can't do, I've got to be wise enough to make sure we don't try to do that. But by and large, just again, that's always been our staple, is being able to defend well against the run, and then it's a little easier to project the pass, and so it's not a 50-50 situation. You can kind of lean a little heavier then on the things you have to do to defend against the pass, but. And it wasn't, I thought that we did some good things in the coverage. We did some, some bad things, and again, they didn't do anything that we didn't anticipate. They got big plays, for instance, out of the quarterback draw. We work against quarterback draw every single day. Just didn't get off blocks, make plays, have an alertness, be able to support out of the second level guys, linebackers, if you will. Variety of different things, but nevertheless, things that we'd been doing reasonably well that we didn't.
Coach, how does a loss affect you at this point in your career compared to earlier in your career?
I don't know. I can't remember that far back, but I don't know that there's any change, and I think you lose ball games for a variety of different reasons, and it's kind of like I was telling our players. it's a great lesson for them, I think, because of, what's the outgrowth of it. People say all the time, it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to it, and there's a lot of truth and meaning to that. There are worse things in life than losing a football game for these young guys, and some of them have already suffered far worse things, than this. And, the important thing is, how do we respond to all of it? And just being able to, again, like I said, have that perseverance and the determination and the mental fortitude to be able to overcome it and, move forward and try to find ways to make it better. I don't, and for me, I don't think it's any different than it ever has been. I think I feel the same way about it. It angers me, but then, that's, as I say with our players, I think if they're competitors, they eventually become angry about it, and I consider myself to be a competitive person, and it angers me as well. But once again, it's what do we do about it? Not just here's your emotions. How do you deal with your emotions, and what do you do to try to make it better? World's full of people that go read what was the president. Calvin Coolidge, wrote a piece on persistence and overcoming, issues and concerns and problems that you face, and it has a great deal of meaning, and I think there's so much fact to it, and it's ever present in our society, and so therefore the players, if they do gain those things I just mentioned, then they have made major steps in their lives towards some of the negative things that will happen throughout their lives, whether it happens to be loss of family members or career issues or health issues. There's a variety of different things that everybody faces that you can either accept it and ride along with it, or you can do something about overcoming it, and that's what I hope that our players are learning, from this.
Coach, has Wyatt Hubert been a bright spot for you guys on defense?
Wyatt is a very competitive, hard-working young guy. He's got one speed, and it's the one that you like. But he still has to learn how to control, himself in that regard. And by that I mean he gets himself out of position, which happened numerous times, in the course of the ball game, just because of his aggressive play. So you got to be aggressive and still be in the right place at the right time, doing the right things. And sometimes he's not there, but he's going to be a fine player. Just has to learn how to be where he's supposed to be.
Coach, expanded on the comments yesterday on quarterbacks. Does that mean you guys would go with Skyler like a regular starter until something happened, or is it not necessarily that cut and dry?
Well, it's not that cut and dry. Skyler will start for us. It appears, at this point in time, this coming ball game. But I don't think anything's ever totally cut and dry. And when you're not playing well, that probably true for everybody.
What, if anything, has separated those two through 2 games?
Not a great deal. Not a great deal. Probably, in the last ball game, we, Alex had a turnover, just a bad decision on his part. So, possession of the ball. That's not the. There isn't one single criteria that I say this made the difference and why. Probably shouldn't have said it that way, but. Probably, at the end of the day, probably played a little bit better than Alex did. And going back to that too, because I had said earlier that, there was a period of time in the ball game in the second half that I felt like we had made some progress, and part of it, was along those lines. Last week we turned the ball over 4 times. We still had one more than we have to have, but we reduced that by 3, so we improved in our ball management to a certain degree. We had those 13 penalties the week before, and we had 2 in the ball game, so we reduced that considerably. Obviously, it didn't help us win, but had we had the 13, it would have been 100 to whatever, probably. But so we're making some headway in some areas, as I indicated. It's just some other things have popped up that we've got to draw attention to.
UTSA showed it could do it a year ago. They beat Baylor. It's the first win against a Power 5 opponent in their history. And looking at the numbers, it seems like they have shown some improvement between Arizona State and Baylor this season. What type of threat does UTSA pose to you guys on Saturday?
Well, I've just from an overall standpoint, I concur with what you said. You've seen some improvement. They have a lot of new players. They don't have, I think, maybe 6 starters that will, are apparently scheduled to start for them, returning from last year. A number of community college transfers, a number of players that were in the program but were not starters last year that are starters now. And so you can see where they have, that would indicate that week in and week out they should get better because they're creating more and more experience with young guys that haven't been on the field with them before. And I saw that in the between their game 1 and game 2, and pretty much across the board. Now they don't, from a defensive standpoint, they don't have good numbers. I mean, people are completing 70% of their passes against them, and they've had, I think, given up right at 500 yards, 498 yards or something like that per ball game. But once again, they played 2 pretty good offensive football teams in Arizona State and Baylor. I think, the quarterback who at the outset or after spring practice and so on wasn't the anticipated starter, but he's their guy now, and watching him on tape, you see him make vast improvement between game 1 and game 2 as he learns the offense, and you see a guy that's got a lot of skill. He's very quick, talented, runs, breaks contain a lot. They use him on the sprint pass to get him out away from the protection issues, and he throws the ball reasonably well. So, he can create some problems for you. Running back situation, not sure exactly which way they're going to go. I think the youngster that they started the season with, had a reasonably productive day against Arizona State, and if he's on the field, he only played 5 snaps this last ball game, so I don't know, injured or what, but it's pretty good. Not that the other one isn't, but he's a pretty good player. And I think their interior defensive line, I think, has there's some real talent there, and guys that move around well, have good physical size to them, and can play physical football. So just off the top of my head, those are issues that we have to have some concern about. And the fact that they run, everybody's virtually in the same offense. They run some of the same plays. The major plays that hurt us against the run game this last week, are ingrained in their offense as well. So we've got to be able to defend the things that we didn't defend this last week.
Yeah, I wanted to ask over here about the offensive line. Just through 2 weeks of the season, where are they versus where you maybe expected them to be?
Well, I think not where, and I can't tell you where I expect them to be, but not where I would like them to be right now. I think we just haven't been as physical as as I would like. And again, a team like Mississippi State has something to say about that. I mean, it's not like they got knocked all over the place against Mississippi State, but I think, we didn't get as much push as you'd like to have. Movement, with defensive linemen. We didn't, we were a little soft in our pass protection. You see our quarterbacks, on a few occasions, had some bad throws, which makes them look like kindergarten quarterbacks, but they've got people up in their face where they end up short arming the ball because they can't get the motion all the way through and consequently throw bad balls. So we just have to be firmer up front in our pass protection and more forceful, I think, in the run game.
As a follow-up to that, have you not seen, because I know during the off season, you mentioned a lot, given they had 5 starters coming back, you were worried about everyone getting in their head and saying, oh, we're going to be great just because we got 5 starters coming back, and you worried about them maybe taking it for granted. Have you seen any of that?
In all honesty, I can't tell you that I have.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're guys that roll up their sleeves and they come to work. I think it's, I don't think, to answer your question, I don't think that they have taken themselves for granted. If indeed any of them did, I think they've got the message by now. But I don't think so. I think they're, like I said, I think they're good workers. They come to practice every day and try to get things right. I didn't see anybody slowing down because of that.
Coach, how have you embraced the new redshirt rules, how it affects a player such as like Cody Fletcher that saw the field on Saturday?
Well, you have the 4 games that a young guy might compete in and still save his redshirt year. Unfortunately, our games have not put us in a position to put somebody on the field just to give them an opportunity, to take advantage of that. And as I've said so many times, if we were in that position, then my biggest concern is getting the guys who, at some point in time during the course of the season, are going to have to step up from a number 2 to a number 1 because of injuries. We're already feeling, a portion of that. And if we, you'd love to have, freshmen be able to take, some playing time in 4 games. But if you take it away from, when you have the opportunity, if you take it away from those number 2 guys, then you get, further along in the season, all of a sudden that number 2 guy jumps in there, but he hasn't had the repetition that you'd like to have for him to have, if that makes sense to you, what I'm saying.
Coach, through 2 games, what to you have been the biggest issues at wide receiver that you've seen?
Well, in the first ball game, it was just catching the ball. Second ball game, again, that was something we improved upon. We didn't have, major issues with catching the ball. In the second ball game, in all reality, it's not that they played poorly. There are some, assignment issues and alignment issues that, that were concerning in this ball game. As far as the execution, it wasn't. It wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible either. I mean, the execution was okay. It was like I said, just sometimes assignment, alignment concerns, mistakes, so to speak.
Coach, Elijah Sullivan came off the field a couple of times on Saturday.
Who did?
Elijah Sullivan.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any update on his status right now?
Is he?
Yeah, is he okay? Is there any update on his status?
Well, he came off for a reason, quite obviously, but it appears as though he'll be able to go on Saturday. Yes, that's the intent now.
I have a follow-up on him. Has it been tough at all to kind of evaluate where he is just through the 2 games, just because he kind of had to come on off the field so much?
Well, to a certain degree, but we have a pretty good idea. Elijah, made some mistakes in that ball game, but I think one thing he's a pretty athletic young guy. He runs quite well, and he's a good lateral player, sideline to sideline almost. He made some plays on the boundary coming from the middle of the field that were productive for us. But you know, got to stay healthy too.
And I know Andrew's still at least listed as a starter at punter, but what did you think of Bernardo in his first college action?
Well, he hit the ball all right. You know, we put him in a position where, you know, he didn't. I'm talking about Bernardo now. It didn't, you know, hit the daylights out of the ball, but he did what he does, you know, and he kind of the pooch kick environment that he was in. It was a little out of his range for that, but nevertheless, you know, he had it been an actual pooch kick and we were snapping it from the 35 or so, it would have been a great kick. But he did fine, you know. Sills, you know, was inconsistent, you know, had, you know, a couple balls that we can live with and had one or two that we struggle with, yeah.
Coach, on Saturday, Skyler had mentioned that he thought the team was still searching for an identity or trying to work towards that. Is that an assessment you agree with, and how do you go about that as the season goes on, trying to establish an identity?
Well, I think we have an identity. It's not one I like right now, and just because we're not playing as well as we're capable of. That's, you know, that's me. That's not them. I mean, they make the effort. You know, I'm not. You know, and that question has been asked a number of times. You know, what's the identity of you know, of our team? I don't. You know, I don't. That may vary from day to day. That's not an issue for me. You know, there are certain things you want. You want discipline. You want young guys that'll play hard. You want young guys that are competitive snap after snap. Guys that have the commitment to and the discipline, the persistence to, you know, play it one snap at a time and be their best every single snap as you go through the course of a ball game. You know, those are the kind of things that coaches want, you know, out of players. And you know, if you get that, then if I had to say what's your identity, I'd say those things. But we're not there yet.
Last question.
Coach, I mean, I know a lot of things maybe are just a function of game planning, and you talk about the flow of the game, letting things dictate it, not the other way around. Is there a reason just that Justin Stillman hasn't got a touch in the passing game or in the running game through 2 games?
Not really. No, I just best thing I could tell you, just probably wasn't in the ball game at the time that we were doing something that would have gotten the ball to him. Yeah, and it wasn't. You know, nobody's trying to keep the ball away from Justin. Justin's a pretty good running back, you know, in his own right. So it's just kind of who happened to be in the ball game at the time.